Hi, everybody. It's me, the Fedge, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secret Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and we have a very important interview today with Dr. R. Ken Johnston, Sr. And Dr. Johnston is one of 4 civilian astronaut consultant pilots from the Apollo Moon program. He's a retired aerospace worker, ex-U.S. Marine cadet, and so-called NASA whistleblower. His principal claim to fame within the NASA-hating community is that he refused to follow orders and destroy a nearly complete collection of 8x10 glossy photo prints from the Apollo program. Johnston was born in Hart, Texas in 1943 and studied at Oklahoma City University. He enlisted in the U.S. Marines in August 1962 and reported to Pensacola as a Marine cadet for flight training in September 1964. He left the Marines in August 1966. As a qualified avionics technician, Johnston was hired by Grumman Aircraft, principal contractor for the Apollo lunar module, to assist with cockpit and instrument development and training in Houston. He has described his status at that time as a civilian astronaut consultant pilot. From 69 to 72, during the Apollo program, he was employed by Brown and Root, principal contractors to NASA, for management of the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, where all the moon rocks were stored, curated, cataloged, and in some cases distributed to scientists who had successfully applied to carry out analysis in their own labs. An important part of Johnston's duty was to package and ship lunar samples to science labs, together with photographs documenting their exact location and orientation in situ. As such, he had in his office several sets of photographs taken by Apollo astronauts with their chest-mounted Hasselblad cameras. When the moon rock distribution wound down, he was instructed by Bud Laskala, his boss, to destroy what remained of the photo archive, but he kept one set as a personal collection. We're going to talk about that today. And Johnston applied to NASA for the 1977 astronaut selection for duty as a space shuttle astronaut, but he was turned down on the basis of inadequate academic qualifications. The ideal astronaut was no longer a jock, but a highly educated person with useful skills. Accordingly, Johnston obtained a Ph.D. in metaphysics from the Reformed Baptist Theological Seminary in Denver, Colorado, and began using the title Dr. Johnston. However, by the time NASA was recruiting again, Johnston says he was considered too old. He did, however, join NASA's educational outreach program as a solar system ambassador, a purely voluntary appointment. And finally, in mid-2013, Johnston was one of the 2,761 applicants for the one-way only trip to Mars offered by the Mars One project. He was shortlisted as one of the 1,058 quarterfinalists on December 30th of 2013. And Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Dr. Johnston?
Well, we're really excited. Obviously, you are privy to information that we lack, and we're interested both in what you saw and heard, what you heard, just a scuttlebutt, and how you speculate, because you've had a whole lifetime to reflect on stuff. So we want to know about the moon.
Okay, aloha and welcome, Dr. Johnston.
Yes, well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me on your program.
We're so delighted to have you here. And I noticed that you were born in Texas, Hart, Texas, in 43. But the first question I have for you is, where did you grow up, and how does your early life lead you to embark on this career path?
Well, actually, a little correction there. I wasn't born in Hart, Texas. I was actually born in Corpus Christi at Fort Sam Houston, the Army Air Base there back in 1942. After my father was a bomber pilot in World War II, and he lost his life, then my mother moved us from Corpus Christi up to Plainview, Texas, where she married a Marine Corps captain, Roger Wommeldorf. And a couple of years later, unfortunately, he was in the Guadalcanal attack during World War II, and he actually had an injury that took his life. And after that, my mother married a gentleman by the name of T.C. Ray in Hart, Texas, H-A-R-T. And so I spent my youth going through the first grade school all the way up through junior high there in Hart, Texas. And then after that, I left and went on to the Oklahoma Military Academy. And how I got involved in aerospace, I guess, is because my dad was a pilot, and the fact that I was only a year and 2 months old when he passed away, the only memory I have of him are the pictures that I grew up with of him in his Army officer's uniform or in his flight suit and the airplanes that he flew. And I made up my mind that I wanted to be like my dad and wear a really sharp-looking military officer's uniform and become a pilot. So that's kind of where I got up to I guess up to the point. I could go all day and talk about what led us up to where we're at, but you can go a little bit further.
I can. Did your dad, who passed over, keep talking to you? My father keeps talking to me. I can hear his voice in my head, and I just wonder if you get messages from your dad like that.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and something that happened during my flight training. Well, let me pick up where after the military academy, Vietnam was starting up and going real strong. I was going to summer school at Oklahoma City University, taking some extra courses, which I would be planning on going back to the Oklahoma Military Academy that fall. And my best friend was ROTC Captain Jack W. Lancaster, came in the dorm one night and says, "Ken, I've joined the Marine Corps." And I looked at her and said, "Well, you can't go without me." Now, here we're brilliant. We're like 18, 19 years old, so you know everything when you're young. And so the next day I go down and enlist in the Marine Corps. And the next day, going from advanced ROTC captains down to the Marine Corps privates at MCRG San Diego was quite a shock. But anyway, Jack stayed in to become a sergeant, staff sergeant. I got picked up on officer pilot training in the Marine Corps, went to Pensacola, where I learned to fly. Now, you say you hear your dad's voice. Well, on my solo flight, you're out, you're doing everything, and the instructor says, land at this little landing strip, no one around anywhere. And he lands, he opens the canopy and says, "Okay, I'm getting out. I want you to take off and make 2 approach landings and come around, and then on the third one, make a full landing and come pick me up." Well, I go off, I say, take off, nice, fine, go up and come around. And I'm coming around on my first approach. In military airplanes, you have a controlled stick, not a yoke like civilian airplanes. So I'm flying and making my first approach, and everything's set, looking beautiful. I got my hand on the controls, and I have this nice, warm glow feeling of the other set of gloves wrapped right around my hand, holding me and guiding me on my first landing. And
wow.
I'm all choked up. Just think that. So, yes,
wow.
I have had contacts from I'm the last of the Mohicans from my father and mother's family. My other two brothers have passed away, and I've had very interesting communications with the past, and to some degree in metaphysics, I have some pretty strong feelings towards life after death and or contact with other sentient beings. So anyway, I don't know if I finished the rest of your question. Let's see. The idea. Okay, so I got out of the Marine Corps in 1966. My brother, Dr. A.R. Johnston, was one of the chief engineers that helped design Cecil, that Space Environmental Simulation Laboratory, which was and still is one of the largest vacuum chambers in the world. There was Chamber A and Chamber B. With Grumman, that built the lunar module, we were able to install the LTA-8 spacecraft lunar module in Chamber B. The command module and its service module could actually be installed in the Chamber A, the large one. And it's fascinating to me that in a program like the space program, in one family, you have my brother, AR, that helped design the vacuum chamber and then later designed the lunar sample processing laboratory inside of the LRL. And then our first cousin, Captain Don Garrett, was an Air Force captain, pilot, and had been selected by the Air Force to be one of the Air Force first astronauts in what was called the MOLE program. And so here he was going to be going into our Air Force's own space station. And then, of course, the government cut the funds and cut the project from it. And so Don was sent to Johnson Space Center in Houston, where now I'm at 1966 there, and my brother's there working on the Cecil. And then our first cousin shows up, and he's going to be the Air Force NASA liaison pilot to be in Chamber A testing the command module, while I am with Grumman as a civilian astronaut consultant pilot testing the lunar module in Chamber B. Isn't that a kind of a coincidence that people that close together with such a
Does sound like a coincidence. Sounds like a synchronicity, like some master plan in operation. That's what it sounds like.
Well, I hope to think so. I've always felt like that. And it was really awesome having all of us there at the same time. So that's how I wound up. When I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to Houston, where my brother was there, and applied to about five of the major aerospace companies. I had 5 offers to go to work with all of them, and I just chose to go with Grumman because that was a little bit more exciting, up my line. Later on, I did work for TRW and a few of the others, writing test procedures for the space shuttle astronauts for doing the manned maneuvering unit evaluation. It's just tons and tons of things that after looking back over your life, you think, had I made this decision instead of the one I made, what would have happened? Where would I be? And it's got to be some sort of master plan. And I can touch on that when we get a little bit further into.
Cool.
So, refresh my memory. When did the first program was the Gemini, and then it switched to the Apollo program? When did the NASA switch and begin the Apollo program? And you were working with Apollo for these Apollo missions. Tell us about that.
Okay. Stepping back one step, when I went to the Oklahoma Military Academy, which, by the way, because of Vietnam and everything else, ceased to be a political thing. They dropped it from being a recognized military academy where you could graduate with as a regular commissioned officer instead of a reserve officer. Then moving on into the I'm sorry, I got a little sidetracked there. What part of it were you asking me again, please?
I didn't. I'm sorry. Are you done with what led you up to work with NASA and all the steps for that? And then once you're done with that, Eric Grumman, right? I wanted to know. I just had a little question. I forgot when the Apollo mission did start. What year it started?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, in 1957, 1957, when I went to the academy, it was when Russia launched their Sputnik. And I remember the senior cadets taking us outside at night, and we all laid down on the lawn and watched, and we could see the little flashing light as Sputnik went around. So right after that, of course, America was running a little bit behind the Russians in the program, and they started up the Gemini program, which was the first launch of Alan Shepard. I believe took place either later in 1957 or 1958. And so we had the several flights of the Mercury. First one was suborbital, where Alan Shepard just went up above the 65-mile high arc or parabola and came back down. And then John Glenn, I believe, was the second one that flew the first orbit, full orbit by an American astronaut. So we completed the Mercury missions, with, I think about 5 more. I don't have all my notes here. But then came the Gemini being the twins, the two. There were 2 astronauts in each one of the missions that flew in Gemini. When I started with Grumman, the last 2 Gemini flights had not flown yet, so I got a chance to be able to go into the MOCR, the Mission Operations Control Room, and just see how they were tracking the Gemini flights, and look forward to what we would be doing when we got more active into the testing, into the actual flights of the Apollo spacecraft, which was the 3-man missions. Yes.
Right, and then you were
Apollo.
You were working with the Apollo astronauts, but you weren't selected to go up in the Apollo program. Is that correct?
That's correct. As I said earlier, we were the ones assigned by Grumman to actually test the lunar module on all the aspects for launch and orbit and translunar insertion and lunar orbit and lunar landing and lunar ascent and docking and then trans-Earth coasting, flying back to Earth. We tested and simulated all those phases of an actual Apollo mission, and then had the opportunity to have the astronauts take part in some of the tests that we did. And as a result, I got to meet all of the assigned Apollo astronauts that would fly to the moon in, the first 2 or 3 missions. And then later on, what was kind of interesting is here we were catching up and getting ahead of the Russians, and then all of a sudden we go to the moon, we land on the moon successfully, they come back, and during that mission, I had the opportunity to take a vacation. We had been working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day for years, and actually even had a technician at Grumman at Long Island at Grumman's main facility. One of the senior technicians came in. He had been working 12 and 14 hours a day for several years without a stop. He went and he clocked in with a little card, stuck it in the time machine, clicked it on, turned around. He says, "You know what? I feel like crap." He leaned back against the wall and slumped to the floor, and he died. So there was a lot of stress going on for us to accomplish John Kennedy's desire for us to go to the moon and return safely.
So where were you when they did the first landing?
Oh, since the mission control room, they have a room in the back which they call the MOCR, which is the Manned Operations Center, where the different contractors, Grumman and I think Lockheed Martin on the command module, we would have technicians, and we'd have special technicians from the different, like the communications experts, the environmental control systems experts. They would be there to test or check anything going along and give information to the mission control officers in mission control. Well, since they only allowed 2 from Grumman, and there were 4 of us plus a couple of engineers, I got the opportunity to take a vacation, and I went back to Bethpage, Long Island, where my wife's family was, and I actually watched Neil and Buzz take the first steps on the moon, sitting in my father-in-law and mother-in-law's house in Bethpage, Long Island. After that, I returned took the family back to Houston, and I got reassigned to another project. Most people don't realize that Hubble, or the equivalent of what Hubble has become, the big telescope in space right now, was going to be attached to the descent to the bottom of the ascent stage of a lunar module built by Grumman, who would then fly up into space and rendezvous with Skylab, which was our very first space station. And then we could go inside Skylab, live there, go back inside the lunar module, back away from, undock from the Skylab, and then rotate around and point our telescope at any place in the universe. So I thought I had a long-term career going there. I walked into my office, and my chief engineer there says, Ken, he says, while you were gone, the government cut the budget, and your position has gone away. We're not going to have a Skylab telescope with the lunar module. But he says, we're going to give you 2 weeks pay plus an extra 2 weeks to find another job. I turned it around. It was, actually interesting because Grumman actually laid off, as I understand, nearly 30,000 employees nationwide, and along with the other engineers. So it wasn't just me. They coined a phrase, a RIF, a reduction in force. we all got riffed. Yeah. So I got offered a position to go over to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory with the company that was in charge of running that, and become one of their technical writers for the processing of the lunar samples brought back on Apollo. And in fact, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins were all in quarantine. A lot of people forget the fact that we had to keep them in quarantine over 21 days when they returned to the Earth to be sure they weren't bringing back any pathogens from another planet. And so after about a month of the lunar processing labs processing the lunar sample, this is something else you might enjoy. When Apollo 11 landed and they took the lunar sample cases from the lunar module, put them on an aircraft, flew them to Hawaii, put them on another aircraft, flew them to Ellington Air Force Base just outside of where NASA is now. And it was supposed to be handled what we would call hazmat today, but they had no idea because the outside of the containers, of course, had been contaminated by dust, what have you. And Dr. Gilruth and some of the other head bosses of NASA rushed right over to the airplane, and they grabbed the handles and they picked it up. They didn't really follow the protocol. So I guess they figured they were immune to anything that might have happened. But so Dr. Jeffrey Warner was the chief geologist. Now, mind you, this was an extremely brilliant young man. He graduated from MIT in geology with a doctorate in geology at the age of 14. So I really enjoyed the man. I mean, he could talk a blue streak, but yet when he wrote some of the most beautiful prose in engineering that you could ever imagine. So he asked me to come over and take over the job of the data and photo control department, which he had been trying to run along with trying to work with some of the samples being processed. I took over the job, which, as you mentioned a little earlier, which required me to be sure that we could provide photographs, orthogonal views, which is all 6 sides of a lunar sample, and pictures of how it was laying on the lunar surface, so we knew the orientation north, south, east, and west, and then a photograph from orbit from the command module showing the location area of where that particular sample came. That was important because the sample had been laying there for thousands of years with solar flares coming from the sun and or other things which could have affected the geology of those samples. That's what the contributing scientists wanted to have all in there. So I had access to all of the pictures, both orbital and on the lunar surface, and all the videos that were taken from the command modules.
Do you see in the overall patterns, when you're looking for overall patterns, anything that looked like structures?
Oh, well, I was getting to that coming up just next.
Good. Thank you, Bill. Go ahead.
Point I was trying to point is that I did have access to all of the information. In fact, that I had a staff of 4 technicians, clerk typists, that would type up the notes from the geologists in the sample processing labs, and I produced the Lunar Sample Information Catalog for them that was distributed out to scientists around the world. Dr. Thornton Page, who was the chief astronomer in charge of astronomy and for the Apollo program, came to me one afternoon. He says, Ken, I want you to go to the photo lab, which there at Johnston Space Center, and I want you to pick up reel number XYZ and set it up a 16 millimeter film that was taken of the moon while Neil and Buzz and the other guys on the other missions were on the lunar surface. The command module was taking pictures of the moon's surface as it went around and around in orbits, waiting for the guys to come back up. So at the photo lab, there's 3 different areas. You can come in the outside room, the main room, and you can request a particular picture or what have you, and if you're cleared for it, they would make arrangements for you to have a copy. Inside, you had to have a secret clearance to go into the middle chamber, and one of the experiences I had going in to get pictures for the data photo control department I walked in, there was a light table. I don't know if you're familiar with backlighting on a light table where you can look at negatives, and they did that. They used to do that with X-ray film, and the doctors would put them up on the So the same type of thing we had here, but this was about a 3-foot by 4-foot light table, and there were 3 people sitting around it, 2 men and 1 young lady. And as I came in to pick up the film, they had magnifying glasses and things. They were looking at the surface, and they were painting things out and airbrushing. And
say that again? They were painting things out? Is that what you said?
That is exactly what I said. They were painting.
They were. That's what they're white-offing stuff.
What did they use to paint it off? Did they use regular paint? Did they have? What were they doing?
Here's something. Let me throw this in real fast. Back during the Gemini program, when the first spacewalk was done by astronaut Ed White, the atmosphere inside the Gemini spacecraft was pure oxygen and just as dry as it could be. And Ed had gotten a nosebleed and had taken his hand, and he had wiped it on the fabric on the inside of that hatch, inside of the door. And later, when he did his first spacewalk, he opened the door, and they were taking the pictures of him as he went up. You could see the blood smeared on the side of the door. Well, when he got back, the astronauts were supposed to be superheroes, and they wouldn't get little old nosebleeds and things. So they went in, they airbrushed that out. They painted it out so it didn't look like it was in there. And I had pictures like that of before and after they airbrushed it out. So that was going on way even before we got to the Apollo program. So they would have I believe an 8x10 positive transparency negative blown up. They would use that to go in larger instead of your Hasselblad 70 millimeter. They would go in and with a brush and ink colored, they could paint out an area. The comment he made to me was, I asked him what he was doing. One guy says, well, we're professional strippers. And the lady says, no, we are stripping out and painting out stars and things on the horizon and stuff, because we don't want people to be confused of these things because they're interested in seeing what the moon looks like. And I said, okay. I went on the back and I checked out the particular reel of film. Now, having been in the Marine Corps and a pilot at Pensacola and other places, I had learned to operate what's called a gun sequence camera. You've seen movies of airplanes in World War II and other places chasing, and as they would fire, you could see that the gun sequence cameras would show where their bullets and streaks were going out from it. Well, those were 16 millimeter, and with a 16 millimeter gun sequence camera projector, I would be able to show that and then stop it, freeze it, zoom in and zoom out. So Dr. Page asked me to take that, set up a private showing for the other astronomers. There were 7 of them total, and we went to the first floor conference room where the mission control is the same building. And I set it up, and we're showing this film. And this particular sequence, and we're coming around on the backside of the moon as we're approaching crater. Memory gets you sometimes. I'm positive it was Tsiolkovsky, the name of the crater, as we're approaching it, with the sun angle on the backside of the moon covering about half, probably 45 degrees, was casting a shadow across the half of the crater. And as we're approaching this crater, in the shadowed area of the crater, there's a cluster. If you will take your hand and turn it palm up and bring your 5 fingers together, it creates little domes looking, and that's exactly what we saw on the backside of the moon. And these domes were illuminated from the inside, so they were glowing, kind of opaque. And one of them had a column of, looked like either air or steam or something had been ejected out and had gone straight up. Dr. Page had me freeze the film, zoom in, look at it, back up the reel, come back, approach again, and several times. And he turned to the other 7 scientists. He said, "Well, boys, what do you think of that?" And they all laughed. And it was like, they were on the inside track. They all knew what they were looking for. And later on, I got to thinking that, Dr. Page knew exactly which reel. And each reel was only about 15 minutes long. So they knew that they were looking for something specific. And he had me pull it out and show it. He then told me to go ahead and complete the showing. It took a few more minutes. And then I had to go check that reel back into the photo lab. And the point I was saying is that room where the stripping was taking place, the back room where the film is kept and all, required a top secret clearance, and I did have that at the time. So that was one of the events of what we discovered on the backside of the moon, is that there was something in that crater that appeared to be a habitat or something going on down there. And the boys, as they call them, little boys, they all seemed to know. Wow. That was one of the first things they discovered. That having
so they were looking for it. They already knew that was a possibility that those structures could exist. Is that what you're saying?
That became obvious to me later on, because first of all, I mentioned earlier how many hours a day we were putting in on the program, and just about the time when we'd see something like that, I want to look into that. I'll check it. But we were so busy for the success of this mission and Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 and then Apollo 13. We had the disaster that we saved all 3 of them by looping around the moon and coming back. And Apollos 14, 15, 16, and 17. And then we quit. And then they laid us all off. It's fascinating.
Right.
In fact, most people don't realize that right about the time that the Apollo shut down, and they had so many of us that were laid off, that and this has been confirmed by other people that were there at the time, who told me that they were told these people who were from the FBI, they actually came to their homes and asked them if they had any books, like the operations handbooks and or designs or what have you, for the spacecraft, and they confiscated those. And that created a big problem later on when we got into the shuttle era, and then they started looking at another man-type mission for space. And they started looking at, well, are we going to be able to go to the moon? How are we going to do it? And most all of the great engineers and scientists that had helped the success of Kennedy's desire to have us go there had gone back into mainstream and gotten new jobs or retired. Because I was only 26 years old when we landed on the moon, and I was the youngest of the consultant pilots. Some of those old guys had flown the hump in World War II into Berlin. And here I was, with spare time, I'd go out and I was a flight instructor and was teaching young pilots how to fly and all. And I asked them, would you like to go out and fly with me sometime? I said, no. I said, well, you're a pilot. I go, well, I flew. Well, how many hours did you have? He said, about 25,000 hours. And I said, good grief. Because before my whole career was over, I only accumulated about a little over 5,000 hours. But these old guys, they said I bored enough holes in the sky. I don't need to go out and do it again. They just didn't have that burning desire like I had at the time. And now that I'm older, I understand where they're from. So, and where did I leave you off at? Checking the film back in? That was about one of the most exciting parts of it.
Go ahead. Question?
We heard so many things about the disaster, and one of the things that was most disturbing to me was people saying that it was a sabotage, and I just wonder first of all, what information there is, but then what was the scuttlebutt or the rumors about what that was all about? How did those 3 guys get killed?
No, there's 2 different incidences. You're talking about the ground fire.
Yeah.
Grissom and who was on that one? Grissom Young or something? But then there was the Apollo 13, where they had to go around the moon. Yeah, what did you know about the fire? Do you have any
Grissom, Chaffee, and White? Gus Grissom. You had Gus Grissom, Roger Chaffee, and Ed White were on the Apollo 1.
Yes.
And you're talking about coincidence and things. I mentioned earlier my first cousin, Captain Don Garrett. He was at the Cape, and he was testing the command module, and they were preparing for the astronauts to come in and do what they call a plugs out test. Plugs out is when they remove all of the cables from the spacecraft, and it operates only on its own battery-powered systems. And Don had been in and had he's the guy who actually configured the switches inside the command module, all three of the Grissom, Chaffee, and White. And when he crawled out, they were going in, and he kind of tapped them on the helmet as they were going in. He left and went to the airport there at the Cape, and was on his way flying back to Houston when he got the call that there had been a fire and that the three astronauts had died. Now, and coincidence, when I was getting my commercial multi-engine flight instructor's ratings there at Houston Hobby Airport, I wound up flying with Gus Grissom's son, who was also, he was a couple months ahead of me in getting his rating, and he had applied for the astronaut program as well, and everyone thought, well, it'd be a shoe-in, because here you got Gus Grissom's son, qualified pilot and all, to join the space program would be good. And he didn't make it. He told me that the family had felt that there had been some sabotage to the command module, because, mind you, what caused the fire was we were operating just like we did in Mercury and Gemini with a pressurized cockpit at 14 psi of 100% oxygen. And if you know anything at all about fires at 100% oxygen, even metal will burn. And then, so all you needed is just one spark that could set that off, and it would be an inferno. And that's exactly what happened. In the floor of the command module, the wiring and cabling going across there, they later determined, or the results of their investigation said that one of the wires had been stepped on or what have you, and it had caused it to short, and that short set off a spark, which ignited everything that was flammable in the spacecraft, and that set us back for a whole year. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Who did it? Did they find out who did it?
No. It was listed as an accident, and that just the wire heated up and shorted out itself and then set the fire. But Grissom's son and them often believed that it was. Yeah. It's got
okay,
Gus,
let's go on.
You remember Gus Grissom?
Yeah, okay, with your story. So you were working, okay, I got lost. You got let go, and then how did you get to working with the Apollo artifacts? Like you said you were, and how many years did you do that?
Oh, what years? Right after the Apollo 11 landing in 1969. So it was just a matter of a couple of weeks right after June the 20th, when we landed on the moon. A couple of weeks later, I was working with, I keep saying Brown and Root, it wasn't Brown and Root. They were part of it. The company that was in charge of maintaining, janitors and the keeping clean and the equipment and all those things at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, actually for the complete Johnston Space Center here in Houston. So, okay, see, you got mixed up, and I got a little mixed up there too. There's so much that took place. So it was, like I say, just a couple of weeks after the Apollo 11 landing, I was there and wound up following my brother's footsteps with the lunar processing and being able to help them track the locations of all the samples that came back. And I did that all the way up through Apollo 14, and then Apollo 15. I have letters of commendation for running and taking over from Dr. Jeffrey Warner and et cetera for doing such a good job. But then they had another reduction in force, and I was one of the unlucky ones that got laid off. And then I went to work for ILC Corporation, who built the spacesuits, and I became a spacesuit test engineer, which allowed me to, in addition to some of the flights I'd done in Apollo, fly in zero-G aircraft and simulate actual neutral buoyancy in the water tanks. You name it, as far as what the astronauts got to do in the training they had, I got to do a lot of almost the same things. And it was quite an exciting thing that I didn't think about when I went to work for Boeing after being laid off at the Johnston Space Center in 1980, December. I went to work for Martin Marietta up in Denver, Colorado, and was working on the space shuttle program from Denver, Colorado. So, you know, just one step after another, you keep getting moved on. And back in those days, you couldn't take your retirement with you. You had to take and cash it out and stuff. So you didn't have the kind of programs we have now. And I think it came about because of all of the engineers and people that we lost our livelihoods and things like that. But because of all the layoffs, and they would only keep the contract. Contracts usually are only good for about 3 years, and then you have to have a whole new contract. And that's how they control the amount of people and actually who is inside and who's not on these contracts. So that's how I found myself up in Denver. And then I got picked up by the Boeing company to go up to Boeing and work on later as a flight personnel. I got sent to Vandenberg Air Force Base to work on the shuttle launch facility at Slick 6, or Launch Complex number 6. And then we had the let's see, what was that we had there? We had the Challenger blew up on its flight, and Martin Marietta was laying everybody off. I jumped on the opportunity. We'd worked for my brother back in Houston at Galveston Bay, and we'd had a hurricane come through, and we were rebuilding ships that got damaged due to the hurricane. And then I got picked up by Grumman, went up to Grumman, so kind of went in a circle there. And then I completed my 14 years with Boeing up in Seattle as a 737 flight instructor. And I retired from Boeing on January the 1st, 1998. And
okay, I want to go back in time to the photographs that you refused to destroy. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you saw in these films and what happened on the day when you refused to destroy images and what are on these images?
Okay. Sure. Now, when I took over from Dr. Warner, we needed to have pictures and things. We had scientists coming in from all over the world to the Lunar Receiving Laboratory and Lunar Processing Lab. And I maintained filing cabinets, and I had 5 complete sets of all of the pictures taken from each mission, as well as the Hasselblad stills and the 16-millimeter film reels that were taken of them. And so I had 5 complete sets of those. Because whenever size would come in and he needed a particular picture from a particular flight or a specific lunar sample, I could go right to the filing cabinet, pulling out and putting together a package that would have them. So my immediate supervisor, his name is Bud Laskawa, he came in and says, Ken says, we've received direction from on high that we don't need all of these. They're just taking up too much space. They want you to destroy all but one set. And I said, well, Bud, you know, this whole program has been paid for by our tax dollars, and I know there's a lot of universities out there that would love to have, these pictures and things for their geology department, et cetera. I mean, why can't we just donate them to universities? He says, no, the direction is to destroy. He says, I don't care what you do, just get rid of them, all but one set. And I said, okay. Yeah, and so I, at the time, now. Go back a little bit for you there. When we would see something that looked like an anomaly or something on the moon that says that does not look like it's any kind of natural formation, if you look real close, that looks like a structure of some sort. Well, I'm going to look at that later. But as I said, they kept getting laid off every 3 years and get moved from one place to another. And so you started developing a little bit of there's something might not be right that's going on here. So whenever I was told to get rid of it, and when Bud says, I don't care how you do it, just get rid of them, I said, okay, I've got my master set right here. I'm going to keep me a set, and these other 3 sets I dumped in the density dumpster. And by the way, about a year ago, I heard that there was a young person, old person now, that had found a lot of actual pictures from that era that had been dumped in a dumpster. So it sounds to me like someone else came along behind me and may have found some of them. But they're I've seen a couple of them, and they're slightly damaged. They've been wrinkled. You know, you throw things in a big Dempsey dumpster, and they're going to get smashed and messed up. So, but I have copies, and I had the copies of first generation. You have to understand something. Have you ever gone to a copying machine and you made a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy until finally it gets down to where it's grainy and it's kind of hard to tell what it was you have a copy of? Well, that's what people have been getting when they go to NASA and say, I want to see a picture from Apollo 12, at this particular location. And they'll give you a copy that may be 4, 5, 6, or even as high as 12 generations old. Now, just recently, within the past month, and we'll have to go back and keep up here, but this is kind of important. MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which is an international professional organization, was in contact with an individual who's now asking NASA to digitize, to scan all of the archives that they've been keeping on ice, 0 degree, preserving them before they are destroyed. Well, and finally, it was just approved this year that they're going to do that. But when you got JPL involved, you get the problem of the opportunity for things to be manipulated and changed really gets high. And so when they said they're going to scan things, they're going to take everything out, and then they're going to scan it. They said, well, okay, in between the time it comes out and scan it, which one are you going to get? You're going to get the original, or you're going to get the one that was airbrushed?
You have the first generation, so what kind of things are you seeing in the images? Inquiring listeners want to know. What are the anomalies?
What were the structures like?
Oh, okay. Actually, during the Russian Zond first orbital lunar spacecraft was taking pictures of the moon, and one of the most famous pictures is showing the horizon on the moon, and off to the left you can see a tower that sticks up 5 miles high from the lunar surface, and over to the right at about 2 o'clock if you use the clock position. On the horizon, there's a dome that is cracked and half of it fallen in, and that's been looked at for decades now. And then there have been a lot of pictures that we have so much more capability to analyze pictures and prints and things now than we ever had. When they'll take a picture and they'll Photoshop and change and stuff. Well, if you go back to the original pictures that I have, and if it's not there, then somebody's messed with it. But
have you published it anywhere?
The pictures are they?
A lot of the pictures that I've had. A gentleman by the name, I'm sure you've heard the name of Richard C. Hoagland. I ran into him 1995, and I have some fascinating books that I've kept over the years. I mean, from Dr. Sitchin as well as Michael Tillinger and Robert Zervin, as well as Ben Bova, all of these people. And I like to get autographed copies because, if you get a chance to meet the authors, I miss getting to meet Zachariah Sitchin in Denver, Colorado, the year before right before he died, one of the last trips he made. And I made a foolish mistake of not taking the opportunity to drive from Albuquerque, New Mexico up to Denver. I would have loved to have met the man before his passing. So, side note, go back to where we were. The objects that we've seen on the moon, my set has been kind of the base that you want to compare anything. Richard Hoagland would say anytime people send something in, would you look at this? And then we'll pull up the copy I have. And then I digitize the entire collection, and I digitize it at like 1500 DPI. So there's a lot of, all the detail shows up there, and it's fascinating to do that. Now, have I published them? Bits and pieces, pictures have been published by Mr. Hoagland and Mike Barra and just about quite a few other people. I've now become very concerned about my archive. What's going to happen to it whenever my 180 years are up? Everybody says, well, I come from a family of I'm lived over 100 years old, and we'll talk about the Mars program a little bit later. What's going to happen with my collection? And by digitizing them, I'm working with two very fine young people, Britt Shepard and Karen, and we're looking at putting my archive into a special way of keeping it so that the world can then have access to the first generation prints. And mind you, these are prints that were made from the original negatives. So there's just an amazing amount of detail there. Now, some of it's going to be in my book that I know you've written books yourself, and you get into everything takes precedence, and you find yourself that you put up. Well, I've got 179 pages written on the book, and I've only gotten through my life up to the point of starting to work at NASA, and so and then I put pictures in of everything. Brett was looking at what I've written so far, and he says, when did you write this? I said, let's see. How about I stopped writing in 2006? Does that give you a clue how long writers can freeze? But now I've gotten the
film today. He said a Russian cosmonaut gave him that she got it from Sony where they were developing film before they sent it back to be scanned or hidden under their paint. But what he said is it was a mining operation. He could actually see the kind of strip mining with the conveyor belts like we have here in the United States. Did you see anything that looked like a huge mine?
Oh yeah, there. Some of the pictures show areas that looks like that there's several different. I've been to a lot of these strip mines, and there's roads that carve around the sides to get down inside, and I guess you could look at our Curiosity rover on Mars right now. It has to find a way to get down inside the craters in places. So there's just a fascinating amount of things. That one of the gentlemen that I had the pleasure of meeting and working with, and is Steve Troy. He for several years worked with Mike Barra on lunar anomalies on the internet, and Steve has his degrees in art, and he preferred to use the human eye with a magnifying glass, and he found a tremendous number of anomalies on the lunar surface. And he has probably the second best collection of prints and pictures to mine of what was taken during the Apollo program. So he's still around. He's still with us, and I hope he's listening to this. I sent him a link. But as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the foremost specialists in lunar anomalies.
What are they mining? Is this current or just abandoned? Did you see any idea of activity or vehicles or craft or anything like that?
Well, there's one of the pictures I have that's fascinating. And I'm sorry I don't have them up in front of me. I could give you the number of it. And let me try my memory here. I believe it was on 14. Apollo 14 was a key mission because of things. And this picture was taken from orbit and coming down in a mountainous area. It looks like the same kind of tracks you see from the rover or up in the Arctic, North or South Pole, these caterpillar type vehicles that can go over rough terrain. This comes down the side of the mountain, arcs and curves around, and a branches off of it. And it took a while, and eventually the scientist with NASA said, "Oh, that was a boulder that just rolled down the side of the mountain, and that's all it was. It wasn't there." But everyone I've ever talked to looked at that and said, "That looks too much like it's a vehicle at the end of the track." And there's just so many things on the lunar surface that geologists will tell you just do not look like natural formations.
What do you think the towers are for?
The towers?
I saw the video that Hoagland made with the towers, and a number of years back it was on VHS. In fact, What do you think the purpose of the towers? Are they around the whole planet or just in one location?
Are they quartz?
Are they
They're
quartz?
like miles high, right? They're like 5 to 7 miles high.
Oh, they some of them reach up several miles high, absolutely. And I'm sure the towers are
Hello? All right.
Are we still in the air?
Are we still in the air? Well, we're coming up on our break. This is Sunny, and something happened. And Sean's calling back.
And I am back.
Oh, good. Well, we're coming over the break in 1 minute, so good timing. So we'll talk about the towers and more anomalies in the second hour. We'd like to get into the story of the Anunnaki and what your ideas on what's going on and why didn't we get back to the moon since Apollo. My question is, Apollo 20, was that real? There's a spaceship on the floor. So I've got a lot of questions. And here I go.
I'm looking forward to it.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet Kara Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and we are interviewing Dr. R. Ken Johnston, Sr. Before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody that Revolution Radio is listener-supported. So please do go over to that donation button on the website at freedomslips.com and donate what you can. $1, $5, $15, $20, $100 would be great. Whatever you can donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donation, which allows us to bring you these programs and more. Before we get back to this exciting interview with Dr. Johnston, Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say?
This is really exciting. We're getting the kind of information reinforced from many, many directions that there's ancient, at least, structures on the moon, and that our government knows about it and is hiding it, and Ken is blowing the whistle on them.
Yay, whistleblowers. And I wanted to go focus on the Sitchin connection with the Apollo mission and the anomalies on the moon. Dr. Lesson, I got to study with Zechariah Sitchin for many years. We were so blessed to be able to travel and be at his intensives that he had once a year for 6, 7, 8 years. So he did get too sick to travel. So we missed his last couple, which were in New York City, but we were so blessed to be able to study with Sitchin. Of course, he's been dead since 2010, and the work continues on. So what I wanted to know is, let's see, what is your idea? Let's see. Okay, you said here under questions, what about the story of the Anunnaki is mostly true? And did any of what you saw in the Apollo images relate to Sitchin's work about the Anunnaki? Take it away, Ken. Are you back? Hello?
Take it on mute.
Ken, are you on mute? Dawn?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I was. My apology there. To back up real quick, though, because it leads into this, Dr. Page, whenever I checked that film back in that same day, that afternoon, I ran into him between the mission control and the lunar signal training. I said, Dr. Page, the next day, forgive me, but the next day I had to check the same reel out, and I was to show it to the rank and file engineers at NASA there at Johnston Space Center. And, of course, I had my brother there, and I said, you guys aren't going to believe what we found on the backside of the moon. Watch this. And we're approaching Tsiolkovsky, and as we approach, the crater is slightly in shadow like it was, and there's nothing there. And I stopped the showing, and so as I was having technical difficulty, I took the film strip out, examined it. It had not been cut or spliced, as you could see on the copy I had. So I put it back in and completed the showing, and when I checked it back into the photo lab, on the way back, I ran into Dr. Page, and I said, what happened to those domes and things we saw on the backside of the moon? And he looked at me, and he gave me a wink, and he says, there was never anything there.
Wow.
Now, decades later, 1985, I was informed that Dr. Page was what you call a $1 a year advisor to the FBI and CIA. That they keep them on the salary so that they're held bound to the contract, non-disclosure. So that I had to throw that in. I didn't want to forget that. You were talking about Inky, and we were talking about towers. The towers, I think, you would have to look at them, and the big dish type tower structure that's there, used for probably about what we're using now today for SETI, et cetera, for communications, and or what other advanced technologies that they may well possess that we don't. Now, when you start getting into what I personally believe are things that I've studied, and I think if you look at Dr. Sitchin's work, and particularly I got into the Lost Book of Inky, where he and Marduk took a little sabbatical and went and spent quite some time on the moon. And I personally believe that these habitats or structures and things, when history is written, usually only the key character is the one that is written down. It doesn't talk about others that may well have been with them to fix their meals or take care of them or do whatever's needed. I'm completely in belief that it wasn't just Inky and Marduk, that it probably had a whole crew there, and they built up an observation. Now, Steve Troy, looking on the front side of the moon, there's one crater that, as the moon oscillates in its orbit around the Earth, almost winds up dead center. Now, if you're going to be observing something on your planet that maybe it's a little hostile environment for your particular species, but the best place to observe to see what things are taking place over hundreds of years or thousands of years, wouldn't a bore-sighted observatory on the moon that's facing the Earth all the time be a perfect place to set that up? So much of Dr. Sitchin's works fall in line with what we've discovered on the moon, as well as on Mars and the habitats and where the Anunnaki on Mars stayed. I think that, in my own personal belief, that, and having a degree also in theology, when you have human beings that write and rewrite the histories usually whoever's the one that wins the war is the one that gets to embellish whatever history is written, and that that the ancient Sumerian tablets that Sitchin translated, I take as being a whole lot more accurate and real than even the Bible, which has been, well, anyway, I get into a whole lot of trouble right there. Oh, and that brings up an interesting point, too. One of the gentlemen who used to be an extremely good friend of mine, and Mr. James Oberg, he was an Air Force liaison to NASA, and he could read and write and understand the Russian language. He knew exactly which cosmonaut was going to fly on the next mission, what orbital inclination the launch would be, how long it was going to be. He knew all of that before it was ever published or took place. And his office was in the same building that the astronauts in, and my office was one floor down. We used to talk all the time about aliens and ETs and how humanity has changed over the period of time since the radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, and how people panicked, some of them committed suicide, down to the point where you got rid of the blob and you got rid of all of these monsters and everything else, to the point where, and it was his comment, he says, we've been conditioned to the point now that if a saucer or craft landed on the White House lawn and the little kids and mom, they're all looking, this little boy says, oh, and this creature walks out of it. The little boy says, look, Mom, there's the Cookie Monster. He's my friend. So we made a lot of progress.
Right. They're changing that, and they keep, Hollywood keeps feeding us stuff, and there's a lot of them that are showing, invasions still, like falling skies, but they're showing that they're intelligent, sentient life that you can have a conversation with, that have, they too can have a heart and compassion and empathy. I loved Star Trek and Gene Roddenberry's, first alien we made friends with was Mr. Spock.
One of the latest comments that I heard since there was combating someone talking about how horrible it would be with ETs and all, and the person says, you realize, of course, that they've been around for thousands of years, and if they wanted to, they would have eaten us a long time ago. So you might as well forget about the fact of them being. Yes, I truly believe that we are the missing link, that the Anunnaki and Inky manipulated our DNA, and frankly, even from a theological standpoint, I'm awfully glad that they did. The other stories I have read. Sir, go ahead.
She mentions not just the time that he and that Enki and Marduk sojourned on the moon after Mars base got ruined by asteroids, but also that when the great 13 years ago.
Yeah. Let me close the door to my office. It appears that my wife has returned home, and our little Chihuahua goes crazy, screaming, wanting to get outside and go see the car. So.
Okay, go ahead and close your office. I thought there was a dog.
I'm back.
Anyway, Nanar repaired to the moon, and he was hanging out there until in Haran, Nabadai's mother found a communication device in some cloth that had belonged to Nanar, and induced him to return and make her son the king of the whole of Sumer again. So there's this more than just that one allusion to Anunnaki powers, and of course their retinues being on the moon and using it. And there's even earlier literature about the ancients who were here even before the Anunnaki, who had also had observation, at least facilities on the moon.
Right, and then of course we have this on Mars when Emma was coming through to Earth on the first journey here, and she had to stop by and see if Alalu and Anzu were alive, and Anzu was alive, and Alalu had died. So she built the monument, which is the face on Mars, which Hovland got very famous. He discovered it and put it out in Cydonia, the city of Cydonia, on Mars, and that that face on Mars faces the Sphinx, right? Yeah, so they face each other. So talking about the location, the logical location to have these different facilities. So it logically aligns with the face on the Earth. The Sphinx was put up later, at a later time. So
yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we have advanced sociologically and technologically to the point where we can understand, and if you look at some of the writing, they talked about the Anunnaki came out of the ocean, and later they could see them holding a rock up to their head and talking to someone over this rock. Well, you see people all day going on in their cars, holding these rocks up to their ears and talking on cell phones. And to a primitive, it's so obvious that it almost doesn't need any investigation to see what that was going on back then. So, I truly believe that we are at the point of full disclosure. The problem that even whenever Oberg and I were talking about the effect of exposing humanity to the existence of the technology of a species that is thousands of years ahead of us, what kind of effect would that have on us? And it goes back to when they discovered in the Philippines, the island where they had the natives that hadn't been in contact with any civilization that was advanced. When the president, maybe it was Eisenhower, asked the Brookings Institute to do a research on what kind of an effect it would have on society if there was evidence of the existence of intelligent life. And it was later published in the New York Times, so anybody who's listening wants to go and research the New York Times, they can find this. Paraphrasing, the end result was that any time a lesser society comes in contact with a more advanced technological society, the lesser loses its complete identity and basically ceases to exist. It gets absorbed. And their advice was that we would probably find evidence of intelligent life on Mars, the Earth, and the Moon, and that we should keep it private. Well, NASA has been, in my opinion, following that directive ever since the very beginning of our space program. And it's a shame, because now we are at a point where even the Pope said, sure, there's bound to be intelligent life somewhere out in the universe. I just don't think of that close. But then I love to think about a closed mind. It's a lot of wasted space. So we have to see what's going to happen. And I really, truly believe in not just my generation, but in the next few years, and I hope it's within the next few months, that more and more of this evidence and other people that have kept data and information like I did, that it's coming out. It becomes irrefutable when you've got first-hand experience. Unfortunately, I was one of the youngest, and so many of them have passed away and taken their secrets with them to the grave. So I'm glad I'm actually willing now finally to come out of the closet, so to speak. And I guess for years I kind of just ignored it. And then when Mr. Hoagland was going to sign the book for me and found out who I was, I started getting up. The concern we had is a lot of people have died that were in key places to know some of the things that had gone on. And Mr. Hoagland's desire was that nothing should happen to me, so he set up a national press conference in 1995. And at the time, I was Solar System Ambassador for NASA and JPL, and it was going into my 5th year of that. Whenever the book Dark Mission came out, and I was quoted so much in it, Mr. Oberg contacted Kay Ferrari with JPL and really tried to tear my character and everything down. And I got a call from her and said, we think that you should resign. And he says, we don't think you have our best interest at heart. And I said, well, wait a minute. Don't other people have their own opinions? Oh, yeah, we have a lot of people at JPL that have their own opinions. I said, and they're being paid, right? She said, oh, yes, they're being paid. I said, and I'm doing this as a volunteer free, and yet you want me to resign because I have my own opinion. Well, we think it'd be the best interest. And I said, I'm not so sure. I think you'd have to fire me. And sure enough, the next day I left on a flight with Mr. Hoagland into Washington, D.C., where I spoke before the national press from all over the world and gave some of this information that I gave out today with you folks. And the whole reasoning behind Mr. Hoagland's desire for that is that if you get someone out so publicly, then it's difficult for them to do something to get rid of you without bringing a lot of attention to what and why. And we've seen evidence for, as I say, people that even back in the Roswell incident, that for some reason they wound up dying before their time. And I'm very thankful that Mr. Hoagland got me. So just to let you know how public it gets, at Boeing, as a 730 flight instructor, one of my dear friends who's passed on went to China to teach a class. This won't take long. And everything is 100% translated. So at the end of the first session, he's talking with the translator, and they got into talking about space and UFOs and the moon and all. And he says, yeah, my friend Ken Johnston was working on that. And the Chinese guy says, oh, so you know Ken Johnston? And so even if that kind of tells me that, yes, my name has made it around the world a little bit, a few times. So anyway, so back to Navarro. I think it's a fantastic place. I'd like to go.
Well, I think the more of us have come out, the safer we are, because before, in the previous generation, they would come out one at a time, and yes, they were getting picked off, but one by one by powers that be. But we're coming out in mass now, and it's becoming beyond random probability that this is actual and true.
Well, part of it is people telling the whole truth, not like, David Icke said that, they won't kill me because I'm telling so much truth that everybody thinks I'm crazy. However, when you get this multiplicity of people who have had direct experiences with cover-up, with extraterrestrials, and with pretty nefarious assassination-type things, then it's overwhelming. You put it all together. The public knows disclosure has already happened. Except, it's underneath the failure to share some of the physical characteristics of the moon is the hiding of murders and wars and all kinds of terrible things that are being kept secret too. And once the logs start rolling and the truth starts coming out, you better have a truth and reconciliation program in place, because there's going to be a lot of very upset people.
Oh, I totally agree. And if you're ready for something that I've never told with maybe one or two people, I'm ready to go up. So you had mentioned in the very beginning what kind of experience I'd had with ET and or out-of-body experience. Are you ready for this?
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. In the little town of Hart, Texas, and this was right after Roswell in 1947 and 1948, and I'm at 6 years old, first grade. We had a storm around the area. We got a phone call. Now, mind you, this is how old it was. The phone call came in on this little box on the wall that had a crank on the side and this cord that went to it, to the local woman who had to plug you into whatever phone connection. Those things really existed, and I grew up with that. But the neighbor 3 miles away said that he had seen a big lightning flash out where we lived, and were we okay? And so my stepdad said, well, we'll have to go out and take a look. And my two brothers and I put on our rubber boots, it had rained, and we rushed out across the dirt road to the field next to us about, it was young, so it probably wasn't as far as I thought, but I would say about half a football field. I hit this area, which was a circle of maize that had been flattened, and I'm standing and looking at this big circle of flattened maize, and there's this thing on the far side, and it looked like what we call a whooping crane. Now, a whooping crane is a bird that's almost extinct, but they can stand as high as 4 feet high. And it looked at me, turned its head away, looked back at me, and then started to trot across the middle of this circle, put out its wings flat, got airborne, and then disappeared. And that kind of set me off as a kid, like, wow, what was that? And later, about 3 years, 4 years later, either in a dream state or not, there was a commotion going on behind our little house. We moved into the town of 500 people. And we went outside, and people had all gathered around, and this thing had landed in the open field behind where our house was, close to where the school was. And call it a flying saucer if you want to, but the craft was round, and it had looked like heat waves. And when you're driving on the highway during the heat of the summer and you look at the distance, and you can see these heat waves and things moving up and down. That was all the way around the bottom area of the craft, and a staircase folded down, and then it was like a waterfall curtain opened up, parted up, and this human-looking person came down and kind of waved for someone to come. Everybody else backed up, and someone ran to the car. They took off the left, and I just looked at it and said, and I went right straight over and walked in, and was invited upstairs. And over the next several years, I would have these vivid dreams that I was taken to their planet, and I was being trained as a kid that later on in life I was to become a solar system ambassador between their planet and our planet. And and then as I got a little older and got involved in the Vietnam War and the Marines, and they try to hammer all of this stuff. And getting your education, and Doctor, I'm sure you know this too, you have to be able to parrot back pretty much what they expect, or else you lose your credibility. And so for all these years, I've kept part of that and more silent, because I couldn't lose my credibility as a flight officer, as an instructor, or as an engineer or a scientist. And more recently, getting involved with MUFON and then with Brett and Karen, they've convinced me that it's time for me to come out and talk about those kind of experiences. And one of them is actually being out of body on the edge of a cliff area on Mars, and looking off at a distance. And then when you have an out-of-body experience, usually, in my opinion, what I've observed is you're there in body, no clothing, nothing. You're just there. And so I just leaned forward and lifted off and started flying. And I was flying over the surface area of Mars, coming up on ancient ruins of cities and all kinds of things. And those type of dream states have happened many, many times. And I think one of the most strongest experiences that I've had was while I was working at Vandenberg Air Force Base back in 1981, 82, in that area. I had a dream state that my wife and I had gone to a camp out. We were going to camp out for a weekend, and we were going to go out exploring around, looking at the rocks and all, and we're following this trail along the edge, looking down into the ocean, and I got a rock in my shoe, and everyone else is moving on. I said, okay, I'll catch up with you. And there's a big boulder on the side, so, the trail goes around the edge, around the corner, and they've gone around, and I'm down trying to get my shoelace off and get the rock out, and the surface area on this big boulder turns like a TV screen, and then this face of the person appears on it and says hello to me, and says, you may not remember me, but my name is Valencia, and I am your I'm your guide, and we'll be in touch more later. And that's about all the communications we had. But I have run into other people that have discovered who their contactee person is. And at the time, I didn't realize that the word or the name Valencia, that there was any towns and or places named that. This is another coincidence. So when I retired in 95, and my wife's a computer software engineer and a technical writer, she was offered a position in Mexico with the Bureau of Indian Affairs to fix their Y2K computer problems. So being retired in 98, I'm being a good house spouse. I come with her. We come here, and we wind up buying a house in a county, and the county's name is Valencia. Is that a coincidence? So
wow.
If these out-of-body experiences, and I was very involved in doing regression hypnosis for students at the university. I was pretty good as a hypnotist back in those days. And I discussed with Brett and Karen about possibly having an expert in this field to regress me, but it has to be with new modern technology, because key locked myself to prevent anyone else from getting into my mind, if you're familiar with that, Sasha. So I would be a difficult subject to be hypnotized. Although I'm being technologically involved, I'm willing to accept that they can monitor my brain waves and my respiration and just about everything, and help induce an alpha state or a state of hypnosis, induce a regression. I would be fascinated to find out more about some of the experiences that I've had. So I'm here. I'm available for that.
What you need to do is get permission from the part of you that is blocking it, and find out what its concerns are, and see if you can meet those concerns in a meaningful way. I imagine that it's protective and saving your life and keeping you on your mission in some way. But you need permission of the blockages, because they are part of you. They're in place. They are serving underneath what they want, some deeper need. And it's really, and once you get that and allow them to, anytime you start remembering too much, let these blocking parts tell you, that's enough for you now, Ken, don't do anymore. And if you let that part of you do that, then you'll by degrees allow more and more and more memory.
That could be. Yeah, that could be what took place in just about the end of my career at NASA. I mean, I used to have perfect hearing. I mean, 0.5 decibel across the board, being able to hear anything, a heartbeat nearly, to the point that one night I was experiencing alpha state, and then all of a sudden the ringing started in my ears, and I was communicating, and then all of a sudden I was blocked. And this tinnitus, or whatever you want to call it, ringing has continued for now several decades. For it to come on so instantly like that, and it's kind of like every time I try to go into an out state or meditation state, the ringing gets worse. So yeah, I have been blocked and protected.
Yeah, so the ringer, you've got to make friends with the ringer. You've got to find out why it rings and when it came into your life, how it served you then, how it served you through the years, and what its current interests are. You've got to attend to it and make friends with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've tolerated it. I know a lot of people who have actually experienced what they call tinnitus. It's almost driven them crazy. In order for me, different than most people, when I sleep, I have to put earplugs in my ears where the only sound I have is the ringing. And so the outside could be blowing up, and I wouldn't even know it. But I'm at peace with that sound, and so that's part of where I am at physically in this life. But at 73, I feel extremely blessed having the kind of health that I plan on going. My goal has always been to live to at least 180, and with some of the things that is known in the past, there's no reason why we shouldn't. In fact, that's
right. We're living in a generation, Dr. Aubrey de Grey says half of us will live to be 1,000. Our life expectancy really in the thousands. He has nothing to do with ETs or any of this stuff. He's a geneticist and working with the Human Genome Project, and has a huge organization that's international. And, they're talking about, physical immortality after 1,000 years. He said we'll reach escape velocity. And I said to him, are you familiar with the Anunnaki, who they lived to be hundreds of thousands of years, and we are they? And he says, well, I don't want to lose credibility, so I'm not going to go into that. But that's Anunnaki, and we are they. They had life expectancies in the hundreds of thousands of years. So, sure, 180 years, by then, who knows? You might reach the 1,000 mark, and you might reach the point where you can decide whether you want to stay in this form or go to another form, or simultaneously experience here into many levels.
I think the report came out about 6 months ago that stated that the first human to live past 200 years has already been born. And of course, my hand went up. I said, "Okay, I'm ready. we'll see where we go from there."
All right, just hang on to that. Your mind is part of it. What you believe, you create. So that's what we're finding in metaphysics. I have a couple of things I want to address. We have about a half an hour for our show. You were talking about your experience where the ship landed and you went on board. That seems to be a lot of the first generation contact we had, you know, at Big Rock and Adamski and all that generation. And so, and then I had a girlfriend who had the same thing in a small city in Ohio, the whole, you know, small town. Everybody came and there was the ship. And then the next day, of course, the government came in and somehow erased their minds. But she says, I still had the memory. And so, you know, she had to carry that her entire life. I wonder how common that is. And do you have any sense that you were kind of chosen, like you said, as his ambassador to humanity? And do you have any sense of your greater role?
Well, time seems to be able to be manipulated somewhat by Anunnaki, I think. And you asked about the craft. I remember one particular incident where we weren't on the planet. We were actually up on a mothership type craft, and there were other species there, humanoid. And we're walking along. There were areas where it looked like the babies were being grown in suits and all that. I had also been taught a lot of the technology on how to fly. Later on in my life, becoming a pilot, how to fly a saucer. And in one of these out-of-body dream experiences, I decided it was time for me to go back and visit my family. I figured they probably were missing me. And I took one of the saucers, and because I'd been taught how to fly it, was flying it back to Earth. And that may have been part of one of the reasons why they blocked my hearing or my ability to mentally communicate for a while, because I guess maybe I'm a little bit of a rogue. I'm willing to step out when needed and take the brunt of whatever's going to come to take and do the advancement that we need. So I don't know if that's of any validity or not, but that happened in part of the dream state, out-of-body experiences that I had back then. So I'm open to find out what's coming next. We've got all kinds of things happening. I just read recently there's over 1,000 sightings a day around the planet Earth. I think Anunnaki have reached a point where they realize that we've reached a technological state, and you can tie a lot of that back into the Bible, where they had to mess up our abilities to communicate because we weren't ready back there, the Tower of Babel, or what I'm going to call it. And I think we've reached a state of level of intelligence. Well, you'd hope so, but not when you're looking at ISIS and the rest of the stuff destroying history and all that. By and large, I hope that humanity has reached a level of understanding. Yet a lot of what Oberg would talk about is that even if you were to land a craft at one of the most public places, the White House lawn or wherever the best place is, and invite all of the leaders of the governments and religions to a hearing and to where they're going to explain how we messed up history. The problem is that with blind faith, you're going to have people that are going to go back and still want to fight and not believe the truth when it is right in front of you. So that is the only worry I have about full disclosure, is the effect upon the masses that chase the taillights of the cars to work in the morning and chase the taillights of the cars on the ways back home at night. They're not ready to accept the fact that we can be a part of the galactic, not humanity, but galactic,
like the Federation.
Peoples.
Well, I think that we've been being prepared over the many, the last 50, 60 years, especially since Star Trek came about, that, contact is inevitable and that extraterrestrials are here and they come and go from the planet, and they're actually in all of our commercials. There's some kind of conditioning going on, some kind of public relations to prepare people. We got over Santa Claus. I think that humanity is smart enough, and they have the paradigm now with all these shows about, contacting extraterrestrials, and they're not all the boogeyman type of thing, and not all the blob. That I think it's to give people credit. They're probably going to say, "Oh yeah, I saw that show, I saw that movie. I understand that this is possible, and here it is." So I say bring it on. I think what they're going to do, this is a download I have about 2 months ago, that they're going to do a mass sighting where no matter where you are on the planet, you will see the ships. And that's probably, for the hands of the governments, it's going to be the kind and loving extraterrestrials coming to give us the information, because we've been denied this information. We can't make intelligent decisions about what kind of planet-wide systems we have when we're being denied the technology and the information and the truth behind, our governments and the Anunnaki and the faction that's ruling the planet. Dr. Leslie, you have something update that you have about the Linkage Institute and the factions?
Sure. For a long time, after the Sodom and Gomorrah and the spaceport at Sinai were nuked by Enlil's forces, Yahweh's forces, most of the Anunnaki went off. Nanar came back for a while, but Marduk, Prince Marduk, who had once been pretended to the throne of Nibiru and didn't get to succeed, took over Earth basically, and his agents first he wanted to be king of Nibiru. Anu resigned, and they appointed Nanar as king of Nibiru, and so Marduk had been ruling Earth through the Illuminati and all the triangles of secret societies that he was on top of the pyramids. And Nanar's people came and challenged him. Well, just recently, the Galzu, according to my sources, principally Michael Lee Hill, has intervened, and basically the Marduk has been relieved of having to be the doomsday scenario deliverer, and he's redeemed, he says, and he's going to. He says he's the redeemer, but in any case, Galzu said, "Nah, forget all that. This is the age of Aquarius. We are going to help you." And Nibiru actually does loops, a figure eight, not just a straight orbit. And so we have been manipulated, the linkage says, in some way so that the loop misses us. And you can actually see from the Soho photographs that Robert Evans has shown us that there's ships, huge motherships out there zapping incoming debris, and it's obvious that Nibiru's here and the Anunnaki are helping. That's my take, anyhow.
And other kind and loving species. So that's what we have. I mean, we can't really prove it until they, like I said, show up in mass and sit down and tea with us and start coming to our conferences. But in the meanwhile, we're having these lively discussions, and that's why it's delightful to have someone like yourself come forth and share your piece of the puzzle.
You're obviously an ambassador.
Right. There's some.
Well, would it surprise you to know that I also was guided into becoming a master mason, and actually was master of the lodge 3 different times, and also in the Knights Templars, the highest in that, as well as in the Scottish Rite worldwide. Yes. I don't call it the dark side, but let's say the watchers and those that have kept track of where we are and what's been going on. So I think I've been trained for something. Let's hope so.
Right. And so we think it's time, although it just doesn't quite happen. What do you think about the predictions of something happening in September? We're rapidly approaching September. Do you have any insights on what might happen in September?
Well, it's about 3 weeks away. We don't have long to wait.
Right.
No, I don't have any inside information on it at all. I've seen some of the, in fact, that one of the Germans who helped design the solar observatory spacecraft that observed the explosions and things going on the sun, actually. And he won't even talk to me anymore, because once they had that, showed the craft that was siphoning off some of the plasma from our sun, craft almost the size of our Earth. To say that Nibiru is close, the only problem I have with that is astronomers around the world, amateur astronomers, have discovered so much more than the regulars do, that how are they keeping it quiet if it's something that's huge? Bring it on. We're ready.
Right, and there's all these photos that are out there on the internet and movies and everything, and so there appears to be some kind of strange bodies, planets, or things in our atmosphere that are visible, so they're reporting it, but I really haven't made any major conclusion except perhaps it is probably Nibiru's little miniature solar system. They're not solar system. Yeah, they have their planetary system. Yeah.
Sure. With the observatories down on the South Pole actually photographing the other celestial body from that angle that most people on this planet wouldn't be able to observe a craft coming in from that angle from the sun. So yes, it could certainly be around, and September the 15th is coming up real fast, and I think those of us who, like yourself, that have been perhaps trained or picked, we'll find out for sure what our jobs are going to be, and hopefully it'll be something we can really dig into and enjoy, not have to fear. But there's always going to be the crazies out there, and unfortunately, I tell everybody it's not the gun that kills somebody, it's the person behind it. So that's kind of the same problem.
Right. So, you have to enjoy your life. I think living in fear for the next 15 days is atrocious. So I always choose the positive paradigm, positive timeline. I made contact the experience here when I was very young. I was taken on board a ship and shown 24 potentials of future histories of our planetary system, and the worst case scenario was total destruction of the planet blowing up, but there were many positive outcomes, and basically what they told me, which is the message to everybody, is that you are the chooser. Which paradigm do you choose? Which outcome, which timeline do you choose? So there is something about wrapping your head around and co-creating it, and I think there are those dark forces that want us to have a lot of fear. The theory is that they feed on our fear and they gain power from our fear. So I encourage everybody to just change the channel and put on something positive. And if it does come true and you're dead, at least you enjoyed the last 15 days rather than sitting there in fear. There's nothing to do about it anyway. You might as well have fun. That's revenge, is to have fun.
I'm very pleased to see that Buzz Aldrin has now signed on with the University of Technology in Florida to make a positive plan for colonizing Mars coming up. I was, as you said, thought I was locked in solid to be part of the Mars One mission through Mars One Corporation, and kind of like what happened with me applying for the regular astronaut position, and you don't have your doctorate degree, and when you get it, they say, well, you're too old. And then with Mars One, they were looking at people from 18 to 80, and I thought I was locked in. And then when they picked the final 100, they didn't go above the age of 60. And so I was out again. So my feeling there is, okay, I may still beat it there, but I'll probably hitch a ride with the Anunnaki, Valencia, or whoever wants to give me the ride, and we'll go from there and see what happens.
You've been there already. Are you familiar with the stories from Andrew Basiago and Randy Kramer about there already are Mars bases already, and there's a secret space program? Are you familiar with any of those discussions that are out there on the internet?
Well, I know from other contacts I have that some of the pictures from the Mars orbiters, that areas that they don't want us to see, you can see that those are computer photoshopped out and blurred out. So it would not surprise me one bit. I totally believe it. See, we should have been on Mars by 1979, 10 years after landing on the moon in 1969, and with the technology that we had at the time. So there's no question in my mind that we continued on with our Black Ops program, and that's why I'm getting now more involved with MUFON to see if I can be of more help in that area. But it's all just coming down to this end state of where you can't deny what's going on when it's there right in front of you. So I think we all are going to be working together a whole lot more as things progress here, starting in September the 15th. We'll see what happens.
Ken, I just this thing that's been lingering in my mind is when you met the person that came off of the ship, this craft, and he said you were to be an ambassador between our planet and his planet. Did he say what planet that was?
Not that I remember. I think the statement was, you will be busy as a go-between between our people and your people, from our planet and your planet. And again, you have to understand, I grew up over years having the same continuous out-of-body dreaming state, and then my attempt to fly and come back, as I said, time can be manipulated. We're pretty convinced of that. So I got to feel they just put me back and let me grow up, and have been, I guess, guided and having these opportunities to be at the right place at the right time with the right stuff, I guess, to the point where now maybe the ringing will stop and I'll know more what and who I'm dealing with Valencia and whoever else on this planet we've got to deal with. And you can understand why I've avoided even talking about this, because the first thing people are going to come out and say, boy, he is Looney Tunes now. And I've avoided that.
Not at all. It makes sense. When you say what orders the data, that's the hypothesis that orders it, that this has been part of a larger pattern that is manifesting.
And I've recently run into at least one other person who, I'm joking, they say, I think we went to the same school at the same time back when we were kids, because I was talking to this person, they said, you're describing exactly the same experience that I had when I was a kid. And mind you, we're different ages now. So I don't know for sure. My meditation state I go into is that I only want to know the truth. And I believe in the biblical statement, study to know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So,
right.
I'm ready.
What about the stories that they, when the Apollo mission landed, they were already greeted by UFOs, and that they're preventing us from going back? What's your information on that story? Those stories?
Okay, I've actually talked to, and I've been challenged on this by Overg and some of the others. Talked to the others that were actually at Mocher, and he was telling me that they didn't have a secure private link with the medical officer, and then had other things saying no, they did. I wasn't there personally, but I had friends that said they were, and that Neil was saying that they landed on the rim of a crater not far from here. They're watching us, and then Buzz Aldrin came out about a year or so ago, and he talked about the light or craft or whatever it was that followed them from the Earth to the moon, and how he and Neil talked about, well, they didn't want to say that they had a bogey at 9 o'clock following them, so they got on the loop. They got on the loop with Mission Control, and they said, "Where's the SRB Saturn rocket booster stage that was following them?" And Mission Control paused and came back and said, we gave them some idea, but it would have been, thousands and thousands of miles away. There's no way they could have seen it as a reflection or as an object that fell them. So even having Buzz Aldrin come out and admit that they saw, well, he says, I guess the only thing you could call it is a UFO, because we didn't know what it was, but it followed them all the way. And then there were other reports of the communications link after Apollo 17, which we were warned off of the moon, says you're not ready yet. And I've talked to a technician that said he was there that, this was a ham operator that said he had picked up signals. So, unless you have the first-hand experience, I can't say that that's exactly what happened. But then when you look at the whole thing, Sasha, where you put everything in order and sequence, it becomes somewhat undeniable that this is the track that makes the most sense. Occam's razor, this don't stick our head in the sand. Let's take a look at what information has been provided and see which way it leads us.
Yeah.
What about the people that say that we don't have any real pictures of the Earth, that the Earth is flat? What do you say to those people? Do we have any real pictures of the Earth from space?
Do you have any pictures of what in space? I'm sorry.
The Earth. Do we have pictures of the Earth? A lot of people are saying that we don't have real pictures of the Earth, that they're all, Photoshopped, and that the Earth is It's like a huge, just Google it. Go
Sure.
on to YouTube, and it's what? What can we say to people that, hey, we do not have any real photos of the Earth showing that the Earth is round or egg-shaped?
Well, the flat Earth people, they're still out there. I was on Coast to Coast AM radio with George Norrie, and that caller came in, and a couple of them. One of them says, we were talking about Mars at the time, says, well, you're going to go to Mars and you're going to die. And I said, well, you're going to stay here on Earth and you're going to die. And then we were talking about being able to, he says, I don't think you went to the moon. And I said, okay, do we have the Hubble telescope in orbit around? And yeah, we do. And can it be moved and look at different things in the solar system? Oh, yeah. And I said, and they've turned it toward the moon, and they've zoomed in on each one of our landing sites, and there's the descent stage still on the moon. There's the rovers on Apollo 15, 16, and 17 there, showing the tracks where they drove to and all that. Those are there on the moon taking pictures with the Hubble telescope. Now, how could those be there on the moon looked at by the Hubble if we didn't go there? A long pause.
Right.
He said, well, I guess I'm going to look into that. So blind faith can blind you. And some of these people just go up and run off the mouth, and they don't have anything to back up. And I'm blessed that I've been there and done that with a lot of this stuff. So you I think that answers your question. How do I answer? And the thing is, you look at the evidence, and if the evidence says, yes, there is a planet, there is a giant mothership bigger than the Earth coming towards us on September 15th, or if the stuff on the moon is really real, then the evidence can speak for itself, just like in a court of law. You put enough evidence out there, it speaks for itself.
Okay, do you have questions? Okay, I have questions. What's the relationship with the moon anomalies to the Mars anomalies? Have you correlated that with perhaps Brett and other researchers?
Only with Steve Troy and Richard Hoagland and the scientists that work with them. I get inputs occasionally, and I get the pleasure of looking at some of these. Even Brett Shepard, with his art experience and knowledge, is able to look at the pictures. I had a little difficult time the very first time I had Mr. Hoagland come to my house and look at some of the pictures. And it's very interesting because my wife looked at the picture when Apollo 14 and the face mask, and there's this object reflected up in the top of the face mask. And it became a joke about, if you want to know what the astronauts really saw on the moon, look at the reflection of the one they're taking a picture of, because it's going to be behind the guy with the camera. And that one picture has become famous around the world, because what is that object that's there? Then you got the naysayers. Oh, that was just a light in the studio where they were faking this. So you're dealing with intelligence, and you're dealing with stupidity all at the same time.
About that large ship that's on the far side, did you see any pictures of that? What do you know about on the moon? There's apparently a ship the size of Long Island.
You're talking about on the moon or on Mars?
On the moon.
I've seen a picture of, it looks like a craft that was crashed and part of it's partly buried in the sand. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes.
Right, yes,
Okay. I don't have in my archive that particular picture, and so unless I got it in hand of the original to be able to see it, and with our technology and the ability some people have with photoshopping and things today, I'm going to shy away from being able to say that, well, it's real. But then again, it could entirely be absolutely accurate, and I just don't happen to have it in my archive to be able to confirm it.
That's okay. There's also a video series out there about the Mona Lisa, and it's supposed to be Apollo 20, which was a group Russian American.
Yeah. We had enough lunar modules in the factory at Bethpage, Long Island, with Grumman to produce all the way up to Apollo 20, because we were geared and scheduled. The Apollo program was supposed to go to Mission 20. And and because I even mentioned where we're going to use one of those after Apollo 17, and we said we were going to use one of those as the craft to hold the telescope, the Skylab. I think this whole Apollo 18, 19, 20 is a big hoax, and but then again, I wasn't with Grumman at that time, and so I don't have the firsthand information on that. That also got back into it could be manipulated in order to scare society, and because it was like at least the Apollo 21 I saw is more of the fear of the ET, that they're evil and all that stuff. So I'm not going to buy it until I can see it.
Yeah. Well, the one I saw, they just had, apparently there's been a battle or something happened. The ship lost its atmosphere very rapidly, and there were some people that beings that were blown up. You'd have to take in consideration, though, that they had to come back to the Earth, and they had to splash down, and they had to be picked up by a ship that has hundreds of sailors on board ship that would have had knowledge of that mission. And none of them have come forward, and the likelihood that none of them would come forward does not match with Occam's razor and the truth. So that makes it much easier to look at. I don't think we have enough evidence to confirm or deny it either. So I'm just going to leave it out there as an interesting thing. But no, I do not believe that we actually went back to the moon after Apollo 17 because we were told not to. Okay, we have 2 minutes left, and then we're going to be at the end of the show. So you have a degree in metaphysics, and if you want to share about that or anything else you want to share with us, we're coming to the top of the second hour.
Okay. Well, my first doctorate was in divinity, and I did the research on marriage. It's dawn, development, and dissolution. And if you look around today, marriage is kind of not exactly. Most people are not most. A lot of people are just avoiding the whole thing. And as far as in metaphysics, my research paper was on the study of memory transference through here goes age. By the way, give you a good excuse that we aren't losing our memory because they come out and said it's called a door jam reboot. When you walk into one door into another room, you get hit with all of this stuff in the other room, and it kind of overwrites what it was you went into that room for, and you can't remember what it was. But anyway, so that's my excuse, is a door jam reboot here.
How do people reach? We only have a minute. How do people reach you and learn more about your work?
Sure, I've got on Facebook, and unfortunately, I think somebody hacked it just today because somebody put a picture up that I was not pleased with. Just go in and look at Ken Johnston Facebook.
Yeah, well, I'll link up when I get it. Thank you so much, Ken.
Yeah, you're welcome. You also go on YouTube or on the internet and just type in my name, and you'll find dozens of things about me. All right, really a real pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on your program.